Thank you, gentlemen, for your testimony. I am of the mind that I don't believe that Russian intervention in Syria was by any means a counterterrorism objective. I think it was certainly a counterinsurgency objective against those that would have stood against Assad. I think in doing that, you could say that they stepped in it. I think that would be a good way to put it. I think the terrorist activities that have resulted in Russia are proof of that. There's been calls for jihad, obviously by ISIS, by al-Nusra. There's estimates of 5,000 to 7,000 Russians that are over there fighting on behalf of the Islamic State. And that brings me to my first question. Do you think that Russia is going to allow those thousands of fighters back into Russia? What is your speculation or take on that piece of it? By all means, sir.
Absolutely not. I mean, I think that was part and parcel of the strategy in the lead up to Syria, was to usher these individuals out and to encourage them to go to Syria, full well knowing that the Russian Air Force would then bomb them from the skies and then put up a fairly robust border security force to prevent anyone from returning home. Although that does not prevent the radicalization of individuals who were prevented from leaving, never left in the first place.
That kind of creates a very good segue for my follow-up question. It has been said within Russian counterterrorism efforts that the family is the thread that needs to be pulled to unravel a terror group. Could any of you unpack that a little bit in terms of whether that has been a successful policy within the borders of Russia for Vladimir Putin?
So I can start. I think Dr. Clark has also written and spoken about this, but collective retribution is one of the policies that especially local security forces use in Chechnya, Ingushetia, Dagestan, and the other North Caucasus federal republics. It is singularly ineffective. Some analysts will tell you that it's brutal but effective in the short run, but over the long run, clearly it is myopic and leads to radicalization of entire communities who feel that the regime is bearing down upon them. But it is common for family members of insurgents or would-be militants to be kidnapped, to be tortured, to be interrogated, held, sometimes even killed.
Any further? Please, by all means.
I'd like to point out that according to Russia's independent Medusa newsline outlet, whose journalist has gone and interviewed people in the North Caucasus, Ingushetia has set up, one of the republics in the North Caucasus, has set up a commission to try to accommodate some of the people who try to return from Syria to Russia. But I would be very surprised if large number of individuals would use that channel, because they're still liable, according to the Russian law, and they would be jailed if tried and convicted for participation in illegal formations. There's also been an effort to bring in wives and children of the killed rebels, and that has been done in the North Caucasus, and I think the number is in dozens. But again, 5,000 people fighting and only dozens of cases being successfully returned to Russia. Thank you.
Sir, I can speak to some of the empirical evidence that I've come across in my own research on this topic. I was one of the co-authors at RAND of a study on counterinsurgency looking at every single insurgency since the end of World War II to 2009. And we roundly found that what we called the crush them approach, the draconian authoritarian approach to counterinsurgency, was indeed counterproductive in the long term.
Very good. I have one more question, and this is open to any one of you. All of you said pretty much unanimously that we should not cooperate with Russia, that that's a very ambiguous statement when we're talking about counterterrorism. So please, if any of you could give me some examples of normal counterterrorism cooperation that would exist between nations that you believe we should not undertake. Give me some concrete examples of what you wouldn't like to see happen in terms of counterterrorism cooperation. That being the word that you all used.
So perhaps I can start again, and I will have to leave after this. But in terms of counterterrorism cooperation, I would not want the U.S. government to be sharing any information that could compromise sources or methods. I would not want the U.S. government to share any information with the Russian government that could be used against dissidents inside Russia. And certainly I would not want the U.S. military to be engaging in any sort of combat missions or operations or sharing of information on targets in Syria or any other military battlefield, because that would essentially make the U.S. complicit in any civilian casualties that result from Russia's bombing campaign, as well as it would tie us to the toxic axis that Russia has formed with Hezbollah and Iran that we've spoken about earlier.
My time has expired. If the chairman wishes to give you all more time to answer, by all means, but I thank you for your responses.